Lovely in-depth video on strapping out this big ass compressor motor, and unfortunately none of you will see it because my camera went on the cock. Never mind. Well, I did it. I do all my filming and editing solely on my iPhone. I filmed a 25-minute video taking the motor apart. It wasn't on my phone. My battery life had gone down, but there was no evidence of the video. And I come back a few days later, happened to look for my pictures and realised that the video was on there. So yeah, some parts of the video that I would have made aren't present because, you know, I didn't think I was going to finish the video, but there's still a fair bit of scrapping out on there. This is the motor. If you've watched previous videos, you might recognise it came from a big heavy old compressor that I had. So here's the motor on the bench. It seems to be quite old. The compressor it came off of, I've worked with a lot of compressors. I've never seen one as heavy as this, or the metal such a thick gauge. This motor is cast iron. There should be a fair amount of copper in it, but yeah, it's a very heavy old beast. As you'll see when I move it on the bench, trying to tip it over and that when you're sitting down, not standing over it, it's kind of, yeah, it's harder than you would think just for a motor that size. First things first, I take some cutters and cut the cable off. The casing on the motor is held together with 4 steel studs that run from one end to the other, and they're done up with brass nuts. So what I'm doing now, I've just got an adjustable on one of the brass nuts. They come off fairly easy, the top ones at least. I've got a little tub there for brass, and then I'm going to push the stud out the other end and then take the other brass nut off. I did have one that got stuck and I had to put some vice grips, clamp them to the steel stud after I'd taken it out, and then take a spanner to the brass nut. But other than that, they come out fairly easy. The ones on the bottom are a little bit more complicated. Now, when I say complicated, what I guess I mean is fiddly. You can see here I can't get an adjustable on there. I wouldn't be able to get a spanner on there either. Not that, you know, I'm lazy, so I try it just on the off chance I can get away with it. But you can see there's where the feet are. I think the feet Allen key bolt off, but yeah, it's a lot of messing around, especially, you know, the Allen key bolts that are in there are ancient. I've got no desire to share another hex bolt piece up. So I try the drill socket, and I will find out in a second that the drill socket isn't quite long enough to reach the flat sides of the nut, and so I stop being lazy and I get a proper socket out. The problem is with this is that if this was a new motor, you'd be able to put a socket straight on it, but there is years and years of old crud built up around those feet, so it won't go straight on easily. So I put the socket on, and it was just about hold on, but you can't get it on enough to actually, you know, to affect the nut. So then I have to give it a little tap with a hammer to get it on there, and then I can get an extension bar which goes to clear the feet, and then I'm able to take it off. So at this point I've given it a little tap with a hammer. It's not coming apart. I'll level with you, I'm used to taking apart washing machine motors. You can take those apart with harsh language and a flip-flop. So this is a bit more of a challenge. So I expected it to come apart when I took the outer studs out. That didn't happen. So now there's three nuts right on the end of the spindle, and I'm taking those off. I've taken the three nuts off, and I think, let's see if that was what was holding it all together. Give it another tap with the hammer. I'm not getting much purchase with the hammer, so in a second I grab a bolster and give it some clegg with that, but that doesn't work either. So I'm giving it a little look over here, and I realise that the three nuts that I've taken off aren't holding the whole thing together. They're holding an end cap on, and I need to find a way to tear that end cap off. So I go back to Old Faithful, a wood chisel. I just put it on what looks like the join, and it comes straight off, and I throw that in the iron bin, which is an old microwave. There we go. Now, if I'd set the camera height at a decent level, you'd be able to see when I turn the motor around then that there's a nut on the end of the armature spindle, which is holding everything in place. So I now have to sort that out. Now, this is embarrassing to watch back, because I start trying to block the motor. Like sometimes if you're working on an engine, you're trying to take a crank off, you have to find a way. Like I've put in like a gorilla bar in a flywheel or something, so you can lock everything up, so you can take a nut off. So I'm trying that. What I've forgotten is that there are two ends to this motor, and the other end has a pulley on it which has a nut on it. And so numpty that I am, I'm now jamming different things in the motor, trying to jam the armature up so that I can lock everything and undo the nut this end. Eventually, see how long it takes me to work out. I'm still messing around. Eventually I'm going to put my arm up the back. Come on, soft lad, stop. No, that's not going to help you. What are you doing? What are you doing, mate? Come on, pull yourself together. Again, I'm too lazy to go and look for it. I haven't got a socket this size on my socket rail, so I'm going to have to go and look for one. So rather than do that, I'm jamming an adjustable in the end, because that's how lazy I am. Eventually, come on, there's another end to the motor, mate. Come on, look at the other end. The other end. Come on, soft lad. Come on, look at the there we go, you found it. Look, there's a pulley on that end. I think at this point I'm thinking I could put mole grips onto that pulley and that will lock it up, and then I turn around and go, look, there it is, Wally, there's a nut on the end. What a dipstick. So, being the lazy fella that I am, I'm going to put an adjustable on it, get it locked in place so that as I turn the other end, the adjustable will press against the bench and doesn't have anywhere to go, and then I can undo that nut. This is all a long roundabout way of doing it if I'd have just thought about the pulley at the other end in the first place. Right, now that nut's taken out, it should be time to take it apart. So get the destroyer, give it a little tap on top. You can see there's not much of a lip there to get the hammer on, so I'm going to flip her over and then use the feet, which has got, it's going to provide extra leverage. Give that a tap and it starts to split apart. I'm being held up by something. Can you guess what it is? What am I being held up by? It's that same epoxy cable. So for the third time that cable has done for me. So as I pull this end piece off, you'll see a little round bit fall out there. That's the bit that the nuts were attached to, that I took off 3 nuts. That's a sort of cast alley piece, but it's got steel pressed into it in such a way it'll probably go as an alley refine. Now I look at the end piece here, and there is, I've never seen this on a motor before because new motors are largely sort of disposable and recyclable, but that's a grease gun nipple on the end. It's got a lid on it, which I'm undoing now to put in the brass pot. And then I'm going to take an adjustable and undo the actual grease nipple itself, and that can go straight in the brass bin. Right, I'm taking out a slotted head screw. That is holding a steel plate in place. That steel plate holds the brushes for the motor. The clamps that hold the brushes in place are made of brass. I find that in a minute you'll see me scratch them up with the screwdriver. And there are also 4 brass posts which the wires connect to. So I'm going to take all those out. Unfortunately, because of my camera angle, you'll never get to see that. But there are 8 little pieces of brass that come off there, which it all adds up. Now it's time to give the other end of the motor a little tap. I'm not taking the pulley off yet, I'll do that later. I'm giving this a belt now. I'm taking off the front pulley, the front piece of the motor, and the armature all in one go. I need to get the Ian specially out, give it a little tap. Now when this comes off and I turn the main body of the motor over, you can see why I call it a looper type motor. You can see all those grey bits, those are loops of copper. They're just covered in a lot of crap and rubbish from years of use. So I'm taking the hammer here. The copper in the loops is bound pretty tight, so to make it easier to work with, it's a good idea to separate it up. And the Ian Special, the pointy brick hammer, is a really good way of doing that. Now I intend to do a video on stripping motors. I think all of my scrapping friends have done one, but I need to throw my hat in the ring at some point. But the basic principle of stripping a motor is fairly simple. You need to make it so that you can pull one end of the copper through the body of the motor. With a muffin type motor, you have to cut an entire ring off the end. Some people use a grinder, I use a hacksaw. You cut the ring off and then you can push and pull the rest of the copper through the body. With a looper type motor, you literally have to cut the loops at one end and then you can pull the copper through the body of the motor. I'm a little bit slow on this first loop. The later ones I was more sort of in my stride. So basically I'm cutting through the copper cable and separating it out so I can get to the next piece of cable, going through loop by loop. Each loop is made up of several smaller loops. So you cut through the cable, pull it to one side until you cut through all of it, and then you can put a pry bar through the other end and lever it out. Now when I was going on the later ones, I had the copper loop that I was cutting on closest to the bench, so it's on the bottom, and then I would take a big bite with the Irwin cable cutters, more than I could actually cut by hand, and I would have the teeth of the cutters closed on the copper, and then I would tap them closed with the brick hammer, and it would get a bigger bite than I could cut if I was just using it by hand, and then leaving it out the other end, and I get a decent amount of copper when I'm finished. Decent amount of copper out of that motor. It's the cast iron bits of the motor. They'll get the best iron price because they're heavy gauge and they're small. They won't need to be cut at the yard, so you get the best price for those. Over here, here's the armature. You can see that I've been messing about and trying to strip it the fiddly way, knocking these pieces out and yoinking the wire through and whatnot, taking, hammering this copper off at the end here. But yeah, it's really not going so well, especially as these bits, it's so old, these are wood, the little bits in there, rather than plastic. So you try to knock them out and they just splinter up inside. So I think I'm going to go the Ian Matthews route. And Ian Matthews has got a video of armatures that he's chucked them in a fire and burnt them. So it'll burn all. There's no plastic on it; it's all wood, and there's wood or cork or something, some cloth. So give those a burn off, and then it should be easy to get the wire up. Obviously, I've got a lot of wire at the moment, but there's still quite a bit to come. Come up to my brass bit. This is on the inside of the motor. Nice solid brass piece and a few other brass bits attached to it. The brass pulley, all the way around the edges there, were these little copper pieces. And they literally were leaving in the edges, and they would flap back and forth. I've never seen anything quite like it. It's the compressor motor done. It was a bit of a nuisance, more than I thought. But yeah, it's all broken down in the bins now, so I hope you enjoyed the video. Tell your friends. I hope if you like the silly videos, you're not put off by the scrap videos, and I hope if you like the scrap videos, you're not put off by the silly videos. Fingers crossed.